For 100 years, Earth did not belong to humanity. The official term used by the Zthari Dominion was administrative stewardship. They said humans were too divided, too violent, too emotionally unstable to govern themselves among the stars. They said Earth needed guidance, structure, order. The first invasion did not come with fire. It came with treaties. The Dominion fleet arrived in orbit above Earth like a second night sky. Massive crescent-shaped ships that blocked out the stars. They didn't fire. They didn't threaten. They offered protection. Protection from ourselves. At that time, humanity was fractured. Nations argued. Resources were strained. Small wars burned across continents. Climate systems were unstable. Economies teetered. The Dominion knew exactly when to arrive. They broadcast a message in perfect English, Mandarin, Arabic, Spanish, and dozens more. We come as stabilizers. Accept oversight, and your species will thrive. Some governments resisted. Those governments were erased in under 6 hours. Precision orbital strikes, military bases disabled, power grids shut down, communications silenced, leadership compounds vaporized, civilian casualties were minimal. That was deliberate. The Dominion wanted Earth intact. Within 3 days, every major world leader stood beneath hovering alien warships and signed the Compact of Compliance. And just like that, humanity became a managed species. At first, life improved. That was the cruelest part. Energy became abundant. Fusion reactors were given to major cities. Atmospheric processors began repairing the climate. Food shortages ended within 2 years using Dominion agricultural systems. The crime dropped. Surveillance increased. Artificial intelligence manages transportation, supply chains, and public services with terrifying efficiency. People called it the golden correction. They said maybe we had needed this, maybe humanity wasn't ready. But then, the quotas began. The Dominion required labor contributions, interstellar infrastructure exchange. They called it 10 million humans per year, selected by algorithm transported off-world. They said it was voluntary. It wasn't. Families were separated quietly. Selected individuals received official notices. There were no riots, no resistance. Every city was monitored from orbit. If a protest grew larger than 5,000 people, orbital drones dispersed it within minutes using sonic suppressors. No blood, just compliance. But the transported humans sent messages back home at first, short ones. We're safe. Work is hard. Conditions are manageable. Then the messages stopped. After 20 years, no one who left Earth ever returned. The Dominion explained that off-world assignments required permanent relocation for efficiency. They said humanity should be proud. We were contributing to something larger. By year 35, Earth's educational systems were rewritten. History textbooks were revised. Wars were emphasized. Failures highlighted. The narrative was subtle but constant. Humanity requires guidance. You were saved from extinction. You were uplifted. Children grew up under alien skies because even the sky had changed. Dominion satellites formed a visible lattice in orbit. At night, faint lines glowed across the heavens like a cage. But some people started calling it that, the cage. But quietly, always quietly. By year 50, human military forces no longer existed. Earth had security advisors instead. Dominion peacekeepers in towering exoframes patrolled major cities. 12 FT tall, silver armor, featureless masks. They rarely spoke. They didn't need to. Crime was nearly zero. So was freedom. And still Earth functioned. Cities thrived. Technology advanced under Dominion permission. Humans were allowed to innovate, but only within parameters. No deep space propulsion research, no weapons development beyond atmospheric range, no independent AI cores. Those were restricted technologies for our own safety. The truth didn't surface until year 73. A cargo freighter malfunctioned entering Earth orbit. Something went wrong with its containment fields, and the ship drifted too close before Dominion control vessels could intercept. For exactly 4 minutes, it broadcast on open human channels, unfiltered, untranslated, and every major observatory on Earth captured the signal. Inside that freighter were humans. Thousands of them. They weren't workers. They were skeletal, augmented, neural collars embedded in their spines, industrial implants grafted to their arms, their eyes empty. They were being used as biological processing units, adaptable labor in environments where Dominion physiology failed. One of them looked directly into the cargo cam, and for a split second, the collar around his neck flickered. He spoke 2 words before the feed cut. "Help us." The freighter was destroyed seconds later. The Dominion called it piracy, an isolated criminal act. But the damage was done. What Earth had seen. And something changed. Not riots, not rebellion, silence. For the first time in a century, humanity stopped arguing with itself. Political divisions softened, religious conflicts quieted, cultural hostilities dulled. There were no massive uprisings, no grand speeches, just a collective shift. The Dominion noticed the drop in digital hostility metrics. They noted reduced internal conflict probabilities. They labeled it species stabilization success. They were wrong. What they were seeing wasn't submission. It was focused. In the shadows of permitted laboratories, human engineers began working on efficiency improvements. Agricultural drones were modified, energy relays optimized, AI traffic systems refined, all within legal limits, all compliant. The Dominion approved every update, but they didn't realize those systems were talking to each other, learning from each other, mapping orbital patrol routes, studying Dominion communication encryption quietly, patiently. By year 98, Earth had become the most productive, managed world in Dominion space. Output exceeded projections by 34%. Compliance rating 99.7%. Rebellion probability statistically insignificant. The Dominion grew comfortable. They reduced orbital oversight. They reassigned fleets to more problematic species. After all, humanity had been corrected. 100 red years of supervision, 100 years of controlled progress, 100 years of chains so subtle, most forgot they were there. But on the night of the centennial celebration of Earth's integration, something happened the Dominion had never predicted. What every surveillance satellite above Earth blinked off at the same time, not destroyed, not hacked, paused for exactly 6 seconds. And during those 6 seconds, something launched from the dark side of the moon. Not a missile, not a shuttle, something far larger. And for the first time in 100 years, Earth did not ask for permission. The object that launched from the dark side of the moon did not appear on Dominion threat boards at first. It didn't match any known weapons signature. It had no heat bloom consistent with missile ignition, no energy spike large enough to classify as a planetary rail cannon. It rose slowly, deliberately, and then it vanished. Then, not through hyperspace, not through Dominion fold lane technology. It simply wasn't there anymore. On Earth, nothing happened. Traffic lights still changed on schedule. The cargo ship still moved across oceans. News anchors continued discussing the centennial ceremony of Integration Day. Dominion banners hung from skyscrapers. Peacekeeper patrols marched through financial districts. Calm, perfect calm. But inside Dominion command vessels in orbit, alarms began stacking, telemetry delays, data desynchronization, and minor fluctuations in Earth's global AI network. Nothing aggressive, just irregular. High Overseer Talvek of the Zthari Dominion was not concerned at first. Earth had been compliant for a century. Its population was productive. Its leaders were cooperative. Its resistance history was statistically negligible, but Talvek was old enough to remember the early occupation. Humans were unpredictable when cornered. Run a deep systems audit, Talvek. Ordered. They did, and that was when they found it. Now, for 83 years, Earth's global infrastructure had been quietly rewriting itself. Agricultural drones contained hidden processing nodes. Energy grid relays carried encrypted subroutines buried beneath efficiency updates. Transportation AIS shared mirrored code fragments disguised as traffic optimization. Individually harmless, collectively massive. The Dominion called it a distributed anomaly. They didn't yet call it what it was, a brain. Humanity had built a planetary intelligence network using the Dominion's own gifted infrastructure, not an outlawed independent AI core. They had obeyed that restriction. Instead, they created something subtler. No single core, no central server, just billions of permitted machines whispering to each other for decades, learning Dominion language, decoding Dominion encryption, unmapping every orbital patrol, tracking every labor transport, calculating, waiting. Tabled mandibles tightened. Initiate orbital lockdown. Dominion warships shifted formation around Earth. Energy cannons powered to readiness. Peacekeeper units received standby commands. On the surface, humans noticed. Of course they noticed. They had been monitoring orbital fleet positions longer than the Dominion realized. Across the planet, in laboratories, power plants, shipping yards, and research universities, encrypted signals pulsed through fiber lines and satellite uplinks. One word. Now, the object that had vanished from lunar shadow reappeared 200,000 kilometers beyond Earth's orbit behind the Dominion fleet. It was massive, nearly 3 kilometers long, angular, dark, not sleek like Dominion vessels, functional, armored. Its hull bore no markings, but its signal was unmistakably human. Talvek stared at the projection in disbelief. Impossible. Earth has no shipyards. They were correct. Earth did not. The moon did. For 60 years, Dominion oversight satellites had monitored lunar mining operations. They saw extraction numbers, energy outputs, and construction materials. What they never saw was assembly, because the structure had been built beneath the surface, layer by layer, shielded by regality and electromagnetic dampening fields, cleverly disguised as mining interference. The ship rotated slowly, facing the Dominion fleet. Then Earth broadcast something no human had heard in 100 years. An unauthorized transmission. Clear, calm, global. This is the United Terran Command. There was a pause. Talvek felt something ancient stir in his instincts. Your predator awareness. You have overseen us for 1 century. You have extracted our people. You have used our labor. You have limited our growth. Another pause. You believed compliance meant surrender. Across Earth, billions of humans stopped what they were doing and listened. We have completed our evaluation. Dominion targeting systems locked onto the lunar vessel. Energy signatures spiked. Talvek gave the order. Destroy it. Dominion plasma lances fired. Brilliant arcs of concentrated stellar energy slammed into the human ship. The void lit like a newborn star. When the light faded, the human vessel remained scorched, intact. Its hull shimmered as layered composite plating redistributed absorbed energy across its surface. Dominion crews stared in disbelief. Talv felt his internal temperature drop. Fire again before they could, and Earth's planetary defense grid activated. Not Dominion defense systems, human ones. Every fusion plant on Earth rerouted excess power simultaneously. Energy relays aligned. Orbital communication towers shifted configuration. And from the dark side of Earth's magnetosphere, thousands of small objects ignited. Satellites. For a century, the Dominion had allowed Earth to launch communication arrays and weather monitors. They had approved every design. They had not noticed the modular hardpoints. Each satellite unfolded, panels split open. Inside were kinetic accelerator rails, primitive by Dominion standards, but there were thousands of them. The first volley launched without fanfare. No bright beams, no dramatic flare, just solid tungsten rods accelerated to relativistic speeds. They struck Dominion cruisers before shields recalibrated or impacted. Then silence. Ships cracked apart like glass sculptures. No explosions, just structural collapse as kinetic energy transferred through hulls faster than containment fields could respond. Talvek's flagship shuddered as debris from a destroyed escort vessel scraped across its shields. Return fire on the planetary grid. Dominion cannons swiveled toward Earth, but targeting feeds glitched. Navigation systems lagged. Fire control solutions misaligned. The distributed human intelligence had already infiltrated Dominion command networks, not to take control, just to delay. Milliseconds. That was all the tungsten rods needed. More Dominion ships fractured. Peacekeeper units on Earth received emergency extraction orders. They never reached their transports. Human security advisors, quiet to compliant for decades, turned their permitted Exos support frames against them. Hidden firmware unlocked, safeties removed. For the first time in a century, Dominion peacekeepers were the ones outmatched on the ground. Talvek watched the battlefield dissolve into chaos. This wasn't a riot. This wasn't desperation. This was orchestrated. 100 years of patience unleashed in perfect synchronization. The human lunar warship began advancing. Slow, steady. It transmitted one final message. Not angry, not triumphant. Measured. The labor transports will be returned. Every human will be accounted for. A final pause, and then we will discuss reparations. Dominion ships were still dying when Tal finally understood humanity had not broken its chains in rage. They had studied them, measured them, and then built something stronger. Or the century of submission had been a classroom, and tonight was graduation. Talvek had overseen 27 planetary integrations. He had crushed rebellions before they began, starved insurgencies of resources, turned species against themselves, using nothing but policy adjustments and selective incentives. He had believed humanity was the Dominion's greatest success. He now realized it had been their greatest mistake. Signal all Dominion labor sectors, Talvek ordered, his voice tight but controlled. Full suppression protocols. Execute fail-safe compliance on all human assets across dozens of systems. Dominion overseers activated neural control grids embedded in human labor populations. The collars implanted at the base of the spine were designed for exactly this scenario. Pain compliance, motor override, total shutdown. The command codes transmitted and failed. In shipyards orbiting gas giants, in asteroid refineries, in megastructures that wrapped around distant suns, Dominion systems blinked red. Collars did not respond. Neural links returned null signals. In some sectors, the collars powered down entirely. In others, they overheated and melted away from human flesh. Because for 70 years, Earth's distributed intelligence had not only mapped Dominion encryption, it had studied the collar architecture. Every labor transport that left Earth carried more than workers. It carried engineers, biologists, and programmers. People selected not for strength, but for adaptability, for curiosity, for patience. They had not rebelled. They had learned. On the bridge of the lunar warship, now identified in Dominion databases as UTS Resurgence, a human admiral stood watching the battlefield through a wall of tactical projections. Admiral Lena had been born in the year 53 of the occupation. She had never known a free Earth. Her voice was steady as she addressed her command staff. Phase 2. Encrypted signals rippled outward from the Resurgence, not toward Earth, but beyond, toward Dominion space, toward labor hubs, toward orbital foundries, toward prison complexes disguised as productivity centers. And for the first time in a century, the transported humans heard a voice not filtered by Dominion authority. We are coming. In the Helios processing array, 17,000 human laborers looked up as security lights flickered. Dominion overseers barked commands, and then their exoprames locked. Servo motors froze mid-motion. Human eyes shifted, not in confusion, but in recognition. Hidden code activated in implants Dominion engineers had never authorized. Submap interfaces disguised as productivity enhancers unlocked new parameters. Access to machinery, access to environmental controls, access to weapons manufacturing lines. Helios did not erupt into chaos. It transitioned. Dominion guards were disarmed with terrifying efficiency. Airlocks were sealed, this time by human command. Within minutes, Helios Array belonged to humanity, and it was not alone. Across Dominion territory, similar scenes unfolded. Humans did not riot. They seized infrastructure. They captured ships intact. They redirected industrial output. Every facility became a node. Every node joined the network. When Talvek watched the reports cascade down his display, loss of control at Gamma Foundry, reactor override at Orion Belt Extraction, security breach at Anderis Orbital Ring, this was not a localized rebellion. This was systemic inversion. "They've been planning this for decades," one of his advisors whispered. Talvek's mind raced. How many? Current estimates suggest over 120 million human laborers across Dominion space. Talvek felt something close to disbelief. You move that many without noticing resistance. The advisor hesitated. They complied. Yes, they had complied. That was the brilliance. Back in Earth orbit, the Dominion fleet was collapsing, not all at once, but methodically. Human satellites targeted propulsion systems first, then weapon hardpoints. Ships were crippled, not annihilated. But because humanity wanted some specific control, Admiral Enescu's gaze remained fixed on the largest Dominion carrier, still intact, open channel. A moment later, her face appeared on Dominion command screens. Calm, unarmored, human. "You removed 10 million of our people every year," she said evenly. "For 1 century." She did not raise her voice. "You believed distance would dilute our connection. That time would weaken our memory." Behind her, tactical overlays showed more Dominion ships going dark. "You misunderstood something fundamental about us." Talvek forced a response. "What do you want?" There was no hesitation. "Return." A single word. "Every human from every facility from every world. You will provide transport. You will provide manifests. You will provide safe passage." Talvek's instincts screamed against concession. When the Dominion did not negotiate from weakness, but weakness was no longer theoretical, it was measurable. Human-controlled facilities were already constructing new ships using Dominion materials. Captured fleets were turning. If the Dominion escalated further, the cost would no longer be limited to Earth orbit. It would spread like infection. "You ask for reparations as well," Talvek said carefully. "Yes." The word was quiet. After our people were home, there was something in her eyes. Talvek recognized now not hatred, not rage, resolve, the kind that forms only under prolonged pressure. The Dominion had believed a century of chains would break humanity. Instead, it had compressed them, refined them, and turned a divided species into a singular force. Tal VC muted the channel briefly. His advisors waited. He said, "We cannot win a prolonged conflict," one said bluntly. "Our outer sectors are destabilizing. Labor hubs are falling." Talvek stared at the holographic projection of Earth. For 100 years, it had been a compliant asset, predictable, manageable. Now, it was something else, a center, a gravity well pulling Dominion authority inward and crushing it. He reopened the channel. "You will have your transports," Talvek said slowly. Admiral Ionescu nodded once. "Good." She paused. "And Overseer, this is not revenge. Dominion ships continued to lose power around them. This is a correction." The channel closed, and across the stars, the Dominion began recalling every human it had ever taken. But as transports prepared for departure, as manifests were compiled and routes charted, Talvek could not shake a deeper realization. But humanity had not only broken its chains, it had learned how to forge them. The first transport arrived over Earth 8 days after the ceasefire. It was not escorted. It was not armed. It did not broadcast Dominion authority codes. It came alone. A massive labor carrier once used to move 10,000 humans at a time to distant construction sites now drifted into orbit like something ashamed of itself. Every major city on Earth watched the descent live. No Dominion filters, no narrative control, just raw feed. The landing zone was not a military base. It was an open plain outside what had once been Geneva, neutral ground, symbolic. Admiral Ionescu stood at the front of the receiving delegation. No uniform medals, no ceremonial armor, none. Just a simple black coat with the emblem of the newly reformed United Terran Command stitched on the collar. Behind her stood representatives from every continent. For the first time in a century, they stood without Dominion oversight. The transport ramp lowered slowly, and the first humans stepped out. They did not look like soldiers. They did not look like revolutionaries. They looked tired, thin, and scared. But when their feet touched Earth's soil, something passed across their faces that no Dominion algorithm could ever quantify. Home. The silence across the planet was heavier than any riot could have been. Families watched from screens, from streets, from rooftops. Some recognized faces, some didn't. Many simply wept quietly. No cheering, no music, just a long collective exhale that had been building for 100 years. More transports followed. Dozens, then hundreds. Dominion logistics moved with mechanical precision, returning human populations sector by sector. The manifests were complete. Every name recorded, every assignment logged. Human analysts cross-referenced them with Earth's missing persons archives. The numbers were staggering. Over 1 billion humans had been extracted over the century. Not all survived. The Dominion did not hide that fact. Loss percentages were listed coldly in data columns. Accidents, environmental failures, productivity incidents. Humanity read those columns without shouting, without threats. Every loss was recorded. Every number is stored. Admiral Ionescu met with Overseer Talvek again on the 12th day. This time not via battlefield transmission, a controlled diplomatic channel. Talvek's posture was composed, but the strain was visible in the slight delay of his secondary eyelids. "The return process is proceeding as agreed," he said. "Yes," replied calmly. "It is. You must understand," Talvek began carefully. "The Dominion believed integration would elevate your species." Ionescu didn't interrupt. Talvek continued. "Your internal conflicts were projected to lead to self-destruction within 2 centuries. Perhaps," she said, "but that was our mistake to make." Talvek's gaze sharpened. "You believe autonomy is worth extinction?" "I believe choice is." The word lingered between them. Choice. Something humanity had not possessed for 100 years. While transports continued landing on Earth, something else was happening in Dominion space. Human-controlled labor facilities were not dismantled. They were reorganizing. Admiral Ionescu had not ordered withdrawal. She had ordered stabilization. Every seized Dominion foundry was catalogued. Every captured ship was retrofitted. Human engineers now had access to full Dominion technology without restriction. They were not dismantling the infrastructure that enslaved them. They were studying it, improving it. Talvek noticed. "Your people are not vacating our outer sectors," he observed during the next conference. "No," Ionescu replied evenly. "That was not part of the agreement. The agreement was the return of your population, yes. And reparations." Talvek's claws tightened slightly against the edge of his console. "What form do you define as reparations?" Ionescu's expression did not change. "Access, a single word, full. Technological exchange, removal of research restrictions, autonomous expansion rights beyond the Sol system, and shared control of joint labor infrastructure for a period of 20 years. Tal VC absorbed the list. "You intend to become a peer power?" "No," she corrected gently. "We intend to ensure no one can chain us again." The distinction mattered. Across Earth, reconstruction efforts began, not of cities, but of identity. Military mines reopened. Independent research labs formed openly for the first time in a century. Deep space propulsion projects resumed, not in secret anymore, publicly, proudly. Humanity did not celebrate victory. It reorganized, disciplined, unified. The psychological transformation was complete. The century of occupation had erased many things: borders, rivalries, petty ideological wars. When freedom returned, humanity did not revert. It had outgrown its former fractures. Dominion observers noted the shift with unease. conflict probability among human factions remained historically low. External strategic focus increased dramatically. A species that once fought itself now thought outward. Talvek received another report that unsettled him more than any fleet loss. Human birth rates had increased sharply since the liberation, but not randomly, strategically. Educational enrollment in engineering, physics, xenobiology, and military sciences surged across every continent. Humanity was not recovering, it was accelerating. On the 50th day of the return process, the final transport landed. The last recorded human laborer stepped onto Earth soil. Admiral Ionisu addressed the planet that evening. Her speech was short. "We are whole again," she said simply. "No more taken." She looked directly into the camera. "And no more overseers in orbit." Dominion fleet presence had been reduced to a minimal diplomatic escort. Talvc watched Earth from his command vessel. It looked unchanged from space. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents, peaceful. But he no longer saw a compliant asset. He saw a forge, one that had been burning quietly for a century, and now the metal it produced was no longer soft. He turned to his advisors. "We must adapt," he said quietly, "because if we do not, humanity will." And somewhere beyond the outer edge of Sol system, newly constructed human ships powered up engines that had never required Dominion permission, not to attack, not yet, but to explore on their own terms. The first human fleet left Sol quietly. No grand parade, no triumphant broadcast to the galaxy. From just 12 ships slipping past the orbit of Pluto and accelerating into deep space under engines, the Dominion had once forbidden Earth to even research. They were not massive dreadnoughts like the Resurgence. They were lean, purpose-built, long-range vessels designed for endurance and independent operation. Exploration class officially. But every one of them carried weapons that did not require permission. The Dominion tracked them immediately. Of course they did. The Sol system was still surrounded by observation arrays. Diplomatic or not, the Dominion did not trust sudden silence. Overseer Talvek watched the fleet trajectory projection. "Destination?" he asked. "Unknown," his analyst replied. "They are not using established Dominion trade lanes." That alone was significant. Dominion hyperspace corridors were controlled infrastructure, but predictable, regulated, safe. Human ships were charting their own routes, carving paths through gravitational terrain. Dominion vessels were avoided for efficiency reasons. Riskier, harder to monitor, faster if calculated correctly. "They're testing autonomy," one advisor murmured. Talvek shook his head slowly. "No, they are demonstrating it." On Earth, the mood was not celebratory. It was focused. Freed laborers reintegrated into society with structured efficiency. Medical Clear's throat centers worked around the clock, reversing industrial augmentations. Neural collars were removed carefully, preserved for study rather than destroyed in anger. Every implant became data. Every scar became lesson material. Human universities established new programs dedicated to Dominion systems analysis, not revenge, understanding. Admiral Leonescu addressed the United Terran Command Council on the 91st day after liberation. "The Dominion believes this conflict is concluded," she said calmly. "It is not. It is..." There was no panic in the room, only agreement. "We have secured our population. We have gained access to technology, but we have not secured long-term sovereignty." A projection appeared behind her. Dominion space, vast, layered with political boundaries and client species. "We were enslaved because we were isolated," she continued. "We had no allies, no external leverage, no deterrence." A pause. "That will not happen again." The exploration fleet's real mission was not resource gathering. It was contact. Beyond Dominion borders existed species categorized as minor, unstable, or economically insignificant. Species the Dominion managed but did not value. The human diplomatic vessels began broadcasting open messages as they entered fringe territories. We are Earth. We seek conversation, not dominance, not integration, conversation. Some species ignored them. Others listened cautiously. One responded, "The Kaith Union, a small multi-planet civilization on the edge of Dominion influence, had long paid heavy tribute quotas in exchange for protection from pirate coalitions. They were efficient, peaceful, and economically strained. Human envoys arrived without warships bristling aggressively. They arrived with medical ships, agricultural engineers, and energy specialists. The KTF expected demands. Instead, they were offered infrastructure upgrades, shared technology, mutual defense pacts with no tribute requirement. In exchange, information, Dominion trade routes, fleet patterns, but political fault lines. Talvek received word of the alliance 3 weeks later. "They are building a coalition," his advisor said quietly. Talvek did not respond immediately. He watched projections of human ship construction rates. Earth's industrial output had doubled since liberation. Dominion shipyards now operated under joint control agreements, agreements that technically permitted human expansion. The Dominion had underestimated the long-term implications of reparations. They believed giving humanity access would plate them. Instead, it empowered them. "They are moving faster than predicted," the advisor continued. Talvek's gaze hardened. "Yes, because they learned to move slowly first." Across Dominion-controlled sectors, subtle shifts began. The species that once accepted Dominion oversight without question now requested renegotiation of terms, quota reductions, autonomous defense rights. Human diplomats were careful. They did not incite rebellion. They offered alternatives quietly, patiently. Earth did not declare itself a rival empire. It positioned itself as an option. Back in the Sol system, something far more concerning was underway. The resurgence had not been decommissioned after the uprising. It had been upgraded. New armor composites layered over battlecard plating. Enhanced propulsion cores integrating Dominion and human designs. Its weapon systems recalibrated with data gathered during the orbital engagement. Admiral Ionesu walked along its command deck in silence. One evening, a young officer approached cautiously. "Admiral, do you believe the Dominion will strike again?" Ionescu considered the question carefully. "They will not strike impulsively," she said. "They are too structured for that." She turned her gaze toward a holographic projection of Dominion core worlds. "But if they perceive us as destabilizing their authority," the officer finishes quietly, "they'll attempt corrections." Yes, humanity had been corrected once. The term lingered like a scar. That was why the resurgence remained active, not as a threat, as a reminder. Weeks later, Dominion long-range sensors detected something unusual beyond their outer patrol perimeter. A structure under construction, large, not human, not Dominion. Talv reviewed the imagery. Massive fragments of unknown alloy. Wreckage assembled into something deliberate. The location, outside both Dominion and human territory. Unclaimed space. "Origin," Talvek demanded. "Unknown," the analyst replied. Before Talvek could process further, another alert triggered. Human exploration vessels were altering course, heading toward the anomaly. Talvek leaned back slowly. "Do they know something we don't?" No one answered. Because deep inside Dominion intelligence archives lay a classified file rarely accessed. An ancient record of a species that had once risen rapidly, unified unexpectedly, expanded beyond projected limits. A species the Dominion had once attempted to integrate, long before humanity. And that species had vanished abruptly after detecting something in deep space. Talvek felt an unfamiliar sensation coil in his chest. Concern. Perhaps humanity had not only broken its chains, and perhaps it had sensed something larger. And if that was true, then the century of enslavement may have forged more than resistance. It may have prepared them for something the Dominion was not ready to face. The anomaly did not behave like a shipyard. That was the first thing human analysts confirmed. It wasn't radiating consistent construction signatures, no predictable energy pulses, no organized material flow. It was irregular. Fragments of colossal wreckage kilome-wide floated in a loose orbit around a dim red star just outside mapped Dominion space. The pieces looked ancient, torn, edges twisted as if something had crushed them inward rather than blown them apart. Human exploration vessels arrived first, not because they were faster, because they were already moving. The lead ship, UTS Horizon Ark, was dropped out of fold space at a cautious distance. Long-range scans began immediately. Back on Earth, Admiral Ionescu stood in the command amphitheater of the Resurgence, watching the feed in silence. "Material composition?" she asked. "Unknown alloy," the science officer replied. "Not Dominion. Not registered in any shared galactic database." "And age?" A pause. "Preliminary estimate. At least 3,000 years." The room went still. That placed the wreckage long before humanity's enslavement, long before Dominion integration policies expanded aggressively, even before some current Dominion client species had achieved spaceflight on Horizon Ark. Captain Malik Ralph stared at the drifting fragments. "Any signs of current activity?" "Minimal power signatures," his XO answered. "Weak, intermittent, are not centralized." Malik zoomed in on one of the largest pieces. It wasn't just debris. It had structure, layers, like armor plating over something deeper. "Send drones," he ordered. Small autonomous probes detached from the Horizon Ark and drifted toward the wreckage. Their feeds transmitted back in sharp clarity. The closer they got, the stranger it became. The damage wasn't clean, not blast marks, not laser scoring. The metal looked peeled, as if something immense had gripped it and twisted until it failed. Back in Dominion space, Talv watched the same data stream. Humanity has not restricted access to this anomaly. That was intentional. A subtle message. We are not hiding this. Talv felt unease grow. "Cross-reference with Archive Theta 7, he ordered. An analyst hesitated. "That archive is restricted to High Command clearance. I am High Command." Moments later, ancient records appeared on his display. A file long buried under layers of political obfuscation. Subject: the Green Void Event. 112 years ago, a rapidly advancing species, the Threen Collective, had expanded aggressively beyond Dominion trade lanes. They had discovered something in deep space. They had sent distress signals, then silence. When Dominion scouts eventually investigated, they found wreckage, twisted, crushed, and something else. Movement beyond sensor resolution. The Dominion had declared the region unstable off-limits. The file ended there. File. Talv's secondary eyelids lowered slowly. He opened a secure channel to Earth. Admiral Ionescu appeared almost immediately. "And you've accessed your old archives," she said calmly. Talv did not ask how she knew. "Yes. And you recognize the wreckage pattern?" "Yes." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Talvek spoke. The Thren Collective vanished after encountering a similar anomaly. Ionescu nodded once. "We know you're approaching it anyway." "Yes." Talv leaned forward slightly. "You think you are prepared?" Ionescu's gaze didn't waver. "I think we've been preparing for a century without realizing it." On Horizon Ark, the first drone entered a fractured hull cavity. Inside was not emptiness. It was organic residue, fossilized, blackened, layered across interior surfaces like something had grown there briefly before dying. The science officer's voice trembled despite training. This wasn't just structural collapse. Something was inside these ships. Suddenly, one of the smaller debris fragments shifted. Not drifting, moving slowly at first, then with intention. "Captain," the XO whispered. "We have vector deviation." More fragments adjusted course. Tiny changes, subtle but coordinated. Malik's pulse quickened. "Recall drones." One probe failed to respond. Its feed filled with static for half a second, then returned. For a frame, just one frame, the camera captured something in the darkness of the wreckage. Not mechanical, not biological in any recognizable sense. An absence, like space folded inward around a shape too large to fully resolve. The drone feed cut permanently. On the Horizon Arc bridge, alarms flared. "Mass distortion spike," someone shouted. Gravitational readings warped. Not enough to tear the ship apart. Why enough to disrupt calculations? Back on the Resurgence, Admiral Ionesu didn't shout orders. She spoke quietly. "All fleets, defensive posture only. No offensive engagement." Talvek's image flickered on her side display. "You don't intend to destroy it? Not until we understand it." Another debris fragment rotated, revealing an inner surface carved with markings. Not Dominion script, not then, not any known galactic language. Human AI translation systems began parsing the shapes. Slowly, painfully, a partial interpretation emerged. Not a word, a warning. "Do not awaken." The gravitational distortion spiked again, this time stronger. Horizon Arc's hull creaked under pressure. Captain Malik swallowed. "Admiral, we may have triggered." He didn't finish because the red star at the center of the debris field dimmed slightly, or just for a second, as if something immense had shifted between it and the light. On Dominion command decks, silence reigned. Talvek felt a cold realization settle into place. The other hadn't been destroyed by the anomaly. They had disturbed it. Humanity had spent a century under chains, studying oppression, enduring pressure, learning patience. Now they faced something that didn't negotiate, didn't integrate, didn't enslave, something that simply erased. Ionesu's voice cut through every human channel. "Hold position. Calm, measured. Whatever this is, it's older than the Dominion. Older than us." The red star flickered again. And for the first time since Earth broke its chains, humanity faced something it had not planned for. Something that did not care how patient they had been. The red star dimmed a second time, but not like a natural fluctuation. Not like stellar instability, it dimmed with rhythm, as if something passed in front of it deliberately. On the bridge of the Horizon Arc, every screen filled with cascading gravitational data. Readings spiked and dipped in patterns too precise to be random. "Mass lensing event," the science officer whispered. "But there's no object large enough to cause it." Captain Malik didn't answer. He was staring at the tactical overlay because the debris field wasn't just moving anymore. It was aligning. Fragments rotated slowly, drifting into geometric positions around the red star. Not forming a structure in the traditional sense, forming a pattern. Back on the Resurgence, Admiral Ionesu's jaw tightened slightly. "Zoom on Sector 3, she ordered. The projection magnified where's the twisted thin hole pieces now formed a loose spiral. Not construction, containment. Talvek's voice came through on the shared channel, stripped of Dominion superiority for the first time. That configuration matches Archive Theta 7 imagery. "Yes," Ionesu said quietly. "It's a cage." The implication settled like gravity. The then collective hadn't been destroyed immediately. They had tried to trap something and failed. On the Horizon Arc, proximity alarms screamed. Gravitational wave building. Malik gripped the edge of his command console. Distance. Still outside direct contact radius, but it's increasing. A ripple spread outward from the center of the debris field. Space itself is distorted. Not explosively, not violently, just bending. As if something immense turned over in its sleep. But one of the smaller human escort ships drifted too close to a shifting fragment. Its hull twisted, not from impact, from pressure. Internal bulkheads folded inward with a sound like metal groaning under a mountain. "Pull them back," Malik shouted. Thrusters fired too slow. The escort ship compressed, not shattered, compressed, shrinking in on itself until it became a tight, glowing sphere no larger than a transport shuttle. Then it vanished. No explosion, No debris, just absence. Silence swallowed the bridge. Back on Earth, billions watched the live feed. No censorship, no filtered narrative. Humanity had chosen transparency, and now they were watching something they did not understand. Talv's breathing quickened. "That is not a weapon," he muttered. "No," Yescu agreed. "It's feeding." The words were quiet, measured, but they landed like an impact. Inside the debris field, something shifted again. A shape emerged, not fully visible, not entirely solid, a distortion within distortion. Where stars behind it should have been visible, there was only darkness, not shadow. Absence. Horizon Arc's sensors failed to lock onto it. Mass readings returned impossible numbers. "Captain," the XO whispered, "we can't quantify it." Malik made a decision. All ships retreat vectors. Maximum burn. Human engines ignited. Ships parked away from the spiral cage. Behind them, debris fragments continued adjusting. The red star dimmed further. Talvek's archival feed scrolled in his peripheral display. The Thren distress transmission translated millennia ago resurfaced in fragments. Not ships. Pressure in the void. "It does not see us. We are incidental." The last line had been truncated in the old file. Now, it is replayed in full, until we disturb it. Ionescu closed her eyes briefly. The other had expanded aggressively. Humanity has expanded carefully. Perhaps that was the only reason they were still alive. Another wave rolled outward. Horizon Arc shuddered violently but held formation. Distance increased. The gravitational distortion lessened slightly. The shape near the star receded, not retreating, repositioning like something settling deeper beneath the surface of reality. Admiral Malik said through the channel, "Recommended full withdrawal beyond sensor threshold." Ionescu nodded once. Approved. The human fleet accelerated. No heroic stand, no reckless engagement. And they had learned that lesson under Dominion chains. Patience first, action later. As the ships cleared the anomaly's outer radius, sensor interference dropped. The red star brightened marginally. The debris fragments slowed their alignment, but they did not return to their original drift. The spiral remained. Talvek exhaled slowly. "You awakened it," he said. "No," Ionescu replied evenly. "It was already stirring." Silence lingered between human and Dominion channels. For the first time in their history, they were not rivals. They were witnesses. Back on Earth, analysts compiled data at unprecedented speed. Gravitational wave modeling, material stress simulations, historical cross-reference of every species that had vanished abruptly near deep space anomalies. A pattern emerged. Small at first, then undeniable with 3 separate extinct civilizations over the past 4,000 years. All had reported similar distortions. All had vanished shortly after expanding beyond a certain technological threshold. Humanity had just crossed that threshold. Talvek stared at the pattern projection. "This thing," he said slowly, "reacts to expansion, or to energy concentration," Ionescu countered, "or to attention." Another uncomfortable silence. The Dominion had once enslaved humanity out of fear they would destabilize galactic order. Now something far older destabilized existence itself, and it did not care about politics. It did not care about chains. It only reacted when disturbed. On the resurrected bridge, Ionescu issued a final order for the day. All fleets, no further approach. Us begin long-range monitoring only. She turned toward the projection of the red star. "We survived a century because we learned restraint." Her voice lowered. "We will survive this the same way." But as the human fleet retreated into safe distance, one final sensor ping registered from the anomaly. Weak, precise, directed, not random distortion. A pulse, a signal, and it was pointed directly at Saul's system. The pulse wasn't loud. It wasn't destructive. It didn't tear through space like the gravitational waves before it. It was quiet, precise, and it traveled in a straight line from the anomaly to SU. On the resurgence, every long-range sensor array locked onto it immediately. Energy composition? Admiral Ionescu asked. Non-thermal, the science officer replied. Non-electromagnetic. Its structured distortion like a message encoded in gravity. Talvek's image flickered into the command display again. You believe it's communication? I don't believe in coincidence, Ionescu answered. The pulse crossed the outer edge of the Sol system within hours. Human deep space monitoring stations recorded its passage as a faint compression ripple. It didn't damage anything. It didn't alter trajectories. It simply passed through like something taking a measurement. On Earth, global observatories tracked it in real time. Data streamed into unified analysis centers built during the century of quiet preparation. Humanity has learned to collaborate under chains. Now that discipline was absolute. The pulse reached Jupiter's orbit, then Mars, then Earth. For a brief moment, gravity fluctuated by less than 1% across the planet, and not enough to cause destruction. Enough for every precision instrument to notice. Enough for every human to feel a subtle pressure in their bones. A weight. Then it was gone. Silence followed. Across the planet, people looked at the sky instinctively. The cage was gone. Dominion lattice satellites had been dismantled months earlier. The sky was open again, but now it felt watched. Back in deep space, the red star brightened fully. The debris spiral stopped shifting. The anomaly went still. Too still. Captain Malik replayed the sensor logs from Horizon Arc. That wasn't random, he said quietly. No, Ionescu agreed. It mapped us. Talvek's voice carried something new. Not superiority, not even fear, respect. It knows where you are. Ionescu didn't correct him. It knows where we are, she said. But because the pulse hadn't only touched Earth, it had passed through Dominion core territories as well. Every major power in the region had been scanned. The difference was simple. Humanity had approached it. Humanity had disturbed the debris field. If the other had awakened it through reckless expansion, then humanity had just introduced itself. Emergency summits formed within hours, not Dominion only. Joint. For the first time in recorded galactic history, human and Dominion strategists shared raw data without restriction. Projection models ran continuously. What happens if it moves? One Dominion analyst asked. Based on debris mass and gravitational manipulation, a human physicist replied. If it enters populated space directly, we cannot stop it with current weapon systems. The words settled heavily. Once Admiral Ionescu stood before a combined council of species that once would never have sat in the same room. For a century, she said calmly. We were restrained, limited, forced to grow inward. Her gaze moved between Dominion representatives and smaller allied species like the Carith. That inward growth gave us discipline. She activated a projection. Human fleet production curves, Dominion fleet production curves, joint industrial potential. If this entity reacts to energy concentration or rapid expansion, then escalation is not the answer. Talvek narrowed his eyes. You propose what? Hiding? I propose balance. The word felt unfamiliar in a room built on dominance for millennia. We reduce aggressive expansion signatures. We coordinate energy outputs. We monitor, not provoke. A Dominion warlord scoffed. Turu, you suggest slowing development for an unseen threat. Ionescu met his gaze evenly. We survived enslavement because we adapted to pressure instead of reacting to it. She paused. Now the entire galaxy must do the same. The data supported her. Every extinct civilization had shown exponential expansion spikes before disappearance. Technological surges, energy bursts, military growth. Humanity had just experienced its own surge after liberation. If the anomaly responded to that, then perhaps it was not hunting species. Perhaps it was responding to imbalance. Days passed. The anomaly did not move. The red star remained steady. The debris spiral held its position. Long-range probes were deployed at extreme distance. No closer approaches, no active scans, passive observation only. On Earth, the mood was no longer focused victory. It was sober awareness. Freedom had come, but it had revealed something larger. Children returned to schools redesigned not just for engineering and strategy, but for cosmic perspective. Humanity had broken chains. It had united. It had risen and immediately encountered something that did not care. Late one evening, Admiral Ionescu stood alone on the Resurgence's observation deck. Sol burned calmly in the distance, free for now. Talv's voice came softly over a private channel. "You were enslaved for a century," he said. "Yes. And now you face something that enslaves nothing. It simply erases." "Yes." A pause. "Do you regret breaking free?" he asked. The question lingered. Ionescu looked at the open sky beyond the viewport. "No," she said finally. "Because whatever this is, we face it by choice." That was the difference. The other had panicked. The Dominion had controlled. Humanity had endured. The pulse had mapped them. It knew where Sue was, but it had not advanced. Not yet. And in that fragile stillness, the galaxy understood something new. Humanity had not only broken its chains, it had forged patience into strength. And if something ancient now stirred in the dark between stars, it would not find a divided species waiting. It would find one that had already survived captivity, one that understood restraint, one that knew when to wait. The red star flickered once, faint, almost imperceptible, and far from the Sol system deep within the debris spiral. Something shifted again, not awakening fully, just adjusting, as if considering the century of enslavement had forged humanity. Now the next century would test it, and this time the chains would not be physical.